Who the heck was Sally? And what's her headstone doing on a stone wall? Well, I don't know. But I thought she would be a cool little backstory as an introduction to our video series on how to do small tachyometric exercise or topographic survey on this beautiful parcel of 5 acres, which was taken out of a larger parcel of 1,000 acres, which at one point was a farm worked by Stevens family. So my guess is Sally was a woman that married into the Stevens family, got a homestead, cut off of that bigger farm, and ended up retiring here permanently. So what we're going to do is get into some of the history and try and see if we can figure out, well, how she ended up on the top of this generator box. Actually, she was found on a stone wall and tried to be reassembled here on the generator box. But it leaves the question, where is Sally now? Nobody really knows. So hopefully, as we go through the development of this property, we don't find her. Because if we do find her, oh my God, will there be a circus. We'll just pretend we didn't find her. So grab a coffee or a tea. That's what I'm having. And join me as we go around this property, do a little traverse, try and piece together a little history and relativity. We're going to talk relativity, but don't worry, there's no math. A little history. This 5 acres was once part of a 1,000-acre John Hay estate. John Hay was a politico in Washington around the early 1800s, who is credited with writing what is considered by many to be the definitive autobiography of Abraham Lincoln. Yep, that guy, the president. So John Hay was motivated to collect this 1,000 acres when the farmers were going out of business because of the times, I guess, and the poor growing seasons and sheep not doing so great. And he didn't want to see the farms be carved up into small lots, kind of like this 5-acre lot is. Anyway, he would vacation up here on Lake Sunapee, and he made a big compound, gardens, stone walls, all kinds of nifty stuff. And fast forward to today, 600 of those acres are now stewarded by the Society for Protection of New Hampshire Forests. There's a lot of walking trails on it. In fact, one goes right along the back stone wall of this property. The New Hampshire Fish and Game owns another substantial parcel, which is outside of the main cottage and building, carriage houses and gardens and walking trails, which constitute the remainder of the Hay Estate and is managed by the Fells, Friends of the Hay Estate. And it's open to visitors, both locally and out of state, who come and participate in various events that the Fells puts on throughout the year, and just to come and enjoy the outdoors. So prior to Hay's buying the land, this was worked by farmers, and this was part of the Stevens farm, and hence Sally has probably been here interred since, oh, maybe 200 years almost? I don't know. That's a long time. Anyway, fast forward to today when this 5-acre parcel still remains, probably as a result of Sally and her new husband being given a homestead and them wanting to work the land. So this 5-acre lot remains as a private holding with its manicured lawns and gardens, its small cottage and outbuildings, together with the remnant foundations for the barn, stone walls that were once put in place to hold in the stock animals, the cows, the pigs, chickens, etc. that once grazed what was once a field here and has now been returned to a field after it was logged and stumped. And you can see along the back property line is a stump wall. So all the stumps are just pushed over there together with boulders from the field, and is now ready to be turned into a new use. So the first written description of this 5-acre lot was actually only done in 1946. That's right. Until then, it was just informally described by whose property line it adjoined. So the reason we want to base our traverse on that first written legal description is because we got to keep in mind that prior to that, it was just known as the stone wall between the Rowe farm and the Stevens farm. And that's it. And then it was codified into a written document with a meets and bounds description, which was almost similar. And fast forward to today, when we're accustomed to seeing surveys done to a fraction of an inch. Well, the reality was that when people walked their property lines back in the 1800s, it was like to the oak tree at the corner of a stone wall. You know, plus or minus 5 feet, close enough. And in fact, on most rural surveys, we get 1 foot and 500 is considered adequate, good enough, close enough. So let's go ahead and start our traverse. So we're going to head to the first bound at the corner of the property. We call that the point of beginning. And it doesn't really matter where we start, but let's start where the description, legal description starts, and go from there. So here we are at the first bound that we have found. It's the corner of the property. Let's go ahead and start reading the legal description. And this legal description begins as most do. A certain tract of land bounded and described as follows. Beginning at the north corner of the tract at an iron pipe at the east side of the highway from New London to Newbury, the same being the corner of land of the heirs of John Hay, thence southerly on line of said land of Hay, 34 rods, more or less, to end of a wall. So let's go and find the end of a wall, 34 rods from here. But before we do, let's take a closer look at this rod. This iron pipe. Now this iron pipe is galvanized. It's 1.5 inches. And this description was given in 1946. There wasn't galvanized pipes back in 1946. The galvanization process was only invented or came about into being in the 1960s. So this pipe was placed subsequent to the pipe that's described in the first legal description. So is it on the same spot that that first iron pipe was placed? We don't know. But we have an iron pipe that is at this location, and it's also tagged. Well, we can see we got 3 marks on a tree, and we have a tag from the Society for the Protection of New Hampshire Forests. We also see this tree that has 3 big marks, and there's probably a 3rd tree. But all along this line, we will find trees that have red blazes on them to mark the property. We could see it up here. And you can see I've already blazed the line accurately, and I have little pink flags. So let's go ahead and make this traverse of 34 rods. I think it's 34. 34. And by the way, a rod is 16.5 feet. So it's not like we can pace it out or anything. So here's another tree marking. And along the way we find remnants of a stockade fence. So here we continue to see remnants of a stockade fence that's being returned to the ground. So we shall continue on our path. Whoops, I just tripped over another bit of wire fence. We see we're approaching the stone wall. There's the stone wall. Wow, mystery solved. There's a red and white surveyor's pole there. Wow, how convenient. Just take a gander though at what we have. This bigger pile of rocks typically mark the end of a stone wall. And we can see what's left here is the remnants of the corner post of that stockade fence. And it's being reclaimed by the earth. And that brings us to our second bound, which is just a 1-inch iron pipe, 6-inch exposed in the ground. Hello! Like I said, we're likely to run into some hikers and walkers. Again, we take a look at this tree. It's been marked Society's tags, and you stand back, we'll see that there's three marks on the tree. We have another tree here that's dead. That was a bad pick, but that's been marked as well. So let's continue. Thence westerly, a long line of said wall and said land of hay, 51 rods, more or less, to end of wall at east side of said highway. Let's go 51 rods westerly. We'll just follow the other side of the wall. It's easier going. Now this stone wall is pretty sizable, so you know that these farms have been worked for quite a while. And they continue to be worked to this day. As we see, we have another wall starting for some particular reason, not really sure why. We also see that typically along these older stone walls we have old trees, and we see a lot of these big old sugar maples. There they are. There's a nice big one. There's a couple of big ones. Anyway, we're approaching another corner. But this hasn't been 51 rods anywhere near it. This is not even 34 rods. When we do our survey, we will find out how many it is. Anyway, so you can see, but this is a big pile, collection of rock that we're standing on. We can see where this wall meets this point, and this is just one huge mound. Another one kind of goes off that way, and another one kind of goes off this way. So there's a lot of stone, and this whole stone that I'm standing on, you know, is just stone that was taken out of the fields. Anyway, we see another bound. Wow. We don't know if it's a bound, but we found this galvanized iron pipe, about 22 inches exposed. It also is kind of loose, surrounded by rocks. Has two different paint schemes going on. We got a red and an orange. And it kind of looks like it's in line with this wall, but the legal description made no mention of this. So is it a proper boundary? I don't know. I'm guessing no, because we have a 5-acre parcel, and behind and around us we have a 600-acre. So it may have been put there at one point on some survey. Maybe we could find that survey. We don't know yet. But here it is, and it certainly seems to be in line in the southern, well, it's certainly in line with the stone wall. that we came from. Let's see if we can draw it in. I don't know if you can see my prism rod there. But we will continue along this path, which, spoiler alert, you know, I've blazed it already and cut down the trees so we can actually walk easier. So this is not exactly a super mystery, but I want to point out the things that you'll uncover in the field when you do these sort of traverses. And we see this pile of rock here that may have been meaningful. So don't overlook stuff like that as you walk along. So let's continue. And we see right ahead we have a section of stone wall that was either begun or abandoned. One of the finds that I made was this. It's hard to see in the leaves, but it's an outline of a grave, a small grave. And a handprint. No, that's a paw print. Had you going though, right? So this is a little pet grave, apparently. You can see that the dirt is still, you know, still kind of fresh looking. It's a couple years old maybe. Well, I got the 411 on that from the property owner. He had rented out his cottage to a fellow who had a Jack Russell Terrier who got taken out by a coyote. Anyway, let's continue. We've got the stone wall at this point. There's no mention of that in the deed, but we'll continue on a westerly direction. So as we continue along, we continue to see blazes on both sides of the line. So there's the blaze on that tree side and a blaze on this tree on the left side. Now here is a substantial stone wall. We can just follow it. And we can also see and hear the road already. So what we do see at this point, which we'll consider the terminus, are a number of things. Let's go through that. First of all, we see the trees have been blazed with the triple red paint marks. We also see that they've been tagged with the society's tags. So here's one of those tags, number 111. And this, you know, it looks a little sketch. This looks a little sketch. And we have the stockade fence being eaten up by that tree. There's another tree, big old hemlock. And another tag. But there's no bound at this point. I know what you're thinking. That little granite piece looks man-made and deliberately put there. And you're right, it is. I put it there. And I put it there to mark the terminus of our traverse. And we will see how closely that terminus matches the actual legal description of 51 rods in a westerly direction. So let's continue to read it before we get more traffic. So the rest of the description says, to end of wall at east side of said highway, thence northeasterly alongside of said highway to the bound first mentioned. So basically follow the highway back to the point of beginning. Back in 1946, it certainly wasn't the asphalt paved highway that it is today. So, but we can kind of figure that it's in the same general location. So here's a perfect example of what you might encounter to give a glimpse into the history. So we have a tree that has the blaze on it, But more importantly, look at this stockade fence that's like literally in the middle of the tree. So this tree looks like it's at least 60, 70 years old. Nice sugar maple. So the fence has been there that long. So that brings us to the conclusion of our little 5-acre traverse based on our legal description of 1946. And what I want you to take away from this is the imprecision that was done back in the day. I mean, we have a stone wall here that I'm sitting on that's, 3 to 5 feet wide. And at the other end, equally imprecise stone wall with a fence post that's rotting away. That was the corner of a stockade fence at one point. So when you're doing your survey and fretting about getting a closure of one part in 100,000 or whatever it is, you have to put everything in perspective and see how important it really is. Because as we saw, the terminus of our traverse is really unknown. Because we would have expected to see some iron pipe there. But in the legal description, only one iron pipe was mentioned. And that iron pipe is no longer there, because we saw that, a new iron pipe was put in its place. But the basic landmarks are still here. And while we won't get a precise location based on both the legal description and what's in the field here, we pretty much know where the boundaries are, don't we? Anyway, with that, we'll call it for this episode, and we'll get back to the actual hands-on minutiae of doing an actual survey. So thanks for following along. Be sure to like and come back for our other videos. Hellbilly out.